Hey there! Is today your first time here? Or maybe your first time in a while? If so, maybe you're wondering exactly who we are and what this church is all about. Well, we'd like you to know that we're a group of ordinary people who are on an amazing journey together, following Christ. Our guide is the Bible because it's the divinely inspired Word of God, and it will never take us in the wrong direction. Along the way, we hope you'll see that we are welcoming and spiritually passionate, and that getting to know you is a big deal to us. We know that the road is rough sometimes, but we'll work really hard to bring you practical and relevant messages to equip and encourage you through life's ups and downs. We want you to know that we care about this community, and we believe that it's our job to make it a better place. So, no matter who you are or where you've been, we're glad you're here with us today, and we hope that you'll join us on our journey, following Christ and living out His plan for us. So, welcome to church.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday School again this morning on this 6th day of February 2022. And thank you for all that's still plugged in all of last year. And then here we are now going in the second month of a new year, and you're still plugging in, and we do appreciate it. We have another very good lesson today. It is a lesson that kind of sad, and it's also in the end, we see some light at the end of the tunnel, but it was a bad situation for a man and his family. And but anyway, we're gonna get right into it. Nathan condemns David. His sin did not go unnoticed by God nor the man of God. And we're coming from 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 1 through 9, and verse 13 through 15. For those that are visiting for the first time, my name is Ricky Pitts, and I'll be your Sunday school teacher for today. I'm teaching on behalf of Bishop Nolan T. Torbert, who pastors and founded True Deliverance Holiness Church. And so we're going to get right into it here today. I want to open up our class with three questions that we want you to think about as we go throughout this lesson today. Number one is, how can a story help prepare a person to face a confrontation? A parable. Number two, why is it easier to see someone else's wrong before seeing our own wrong? Number three is, why is it so hard to judge ourselves? You know, it ain't hard to judge somebody else, you know. But the question is, why is it so hard to judge ourselves? Y'all think about that as we go throughout the lesson. And we've gone through all 39 books of the Old Testament and all 27 of the New. And thank God, I had learned them years ago, but I had to go back and relearn them again. And I want to thank God for those that went through and learned them all as well. So the beginning of our lesson is, number one, is really broken down in different sections. Section one is a tale of two men. And that's in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. We have three subjects in these first 6 verses. One is contrasting fortunes. 2 is blatant injustice. And 3 is an angry verdict. So let's get right into verses 1, 2, and 3, contrasting fortunes. And the Lord sent Nathan unto David. And he came unto him and said unto him, there were 2 men in one city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save one little ewe lamb. And he had brought and nourished up, which he had bought and nourished up, and it grew up together with him and with his children. It did eat of his own meat and drink of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him not as a son, but it was unto him as a daughter. Y'all already know how fathers are about their daughters, but this, so Nathan is really painting a picture right here. True prophets, when we look at a little commentary on verse number 1, there were true prophets and there were false prophets. But true prophets were called by the Lord. I want you to read Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. And part of a true prophet's role was to hold Israel's civil authorities accountable to doing the right thing. To tell them when they was going off in the wrong direction, and to speak truth to power. And in 1 Samuel 13, 11 through 14, and 1 Kings 21, 17 through 29, you could read more about that role. And the prophet Nathan always had great respect and showed great respect for King David. However, he had more respect and more fear for the Lord, and that fear and respect that he had for the Lord led him to what some call on a suicide mission, because he had to confront the king for the wrong that he had done, and he had to do it the right way. The Old Testament prophets often used metaphors and symbolisms, talked in parables, to speak against the evil in their nation. And the fact that one man in this story was a rich man and the other man was a very poor man really increased the likelihood of injustice based on an imbalance of power. In verses 2 and 3, Nathan's choice of flocks and herds as a main indicator of the wealth likely resonated with David, because David grew up tending and protecting the sheep of his father, and he protected them and tended them at all costs. He killed a lion and a bear. You read about that in 1 Samuel 17, 35 and 34 and 35. So then we see Nathan then as an expert storyteller. He added a little bit more detail about the nearness and the dearness of this little ewe lamb to the poor man. And as Nathan told David the story, it really tugged at David's heart before David had even heard the whole story, and before the crime that the rich man had committed was even revealed. David started getting a soft spot in his heart, because David knew where he came from, and he knew the job that he had, and he knew how much he cared for the little sheep as he was tending them and caring for them in the past of his father. So we see two hints in this story that should have kind of made him start thinking a little bit. Hint number 1, the sheep laid in the man's bosom. And this brings to mind how David laid with Bathsheba in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verse 4. The second hint is the sheep was unto him as a daughter. And this throws a hint at Bathsheba, whose name means something like daughter of abundance. And after her and David got together, she did have access to abundance. But my goodness, it was in the wrong way. In verse 4, we see blatant injustice, just wide open injustice. It says, and there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock and of his own herd to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him. The Bible says, but took. It didn't say purchase, bargain for, replace with other sheep to get that. No. But took the poor man's lamb and dressed it for the man that was come unto him. Now, at that time in history, any virtuous man or person, whether they was wealthy or poor, would practice hospitality. And they did that to prevent this stranger from falling prey to violence or becoming a victim of violence. You read about this in Genesis chapter 19, verse 3, Judges 19, verses 20 and 21. But for this special occasion, for this dinner occasion, the rich man took and killed the poor man's lamb. And just looking at the wealth, the commentary calls it the wealth disparity between these two men, it's hard to believe that this rich man that had all that he had would be so cruel as to take the only thing that was near and dear to this poor man. It's hard to believe. So Nathan is really painting a clear picture here of a real life situation. And we see in section C, we see an angry verdict in verses 5 and 6. And David was great, and David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, as the Lord liveth, and he shall live, the man that had done this thing shall surely die. Look at David, boy. Look at him. Verse 6 says, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. Now let's look at a little commentary on verse 5 and 6. Exodus chapter 22 and 1 talks about the fourfold recompense for stealing a sheep. So then the verdict that David handed down, that was handed down by David for this guilty man, actually put David himself, his verdict, David's verdict, put himself in a land mine, a landfill that was planted by the words of Nathan. And so when he convicted the rich man, David overlooked his own sin. And he had some harsh words and some strong rebuke for the rich man that did the same kind of thing that he had did himself. It showed the same kind of behavior that David himself had actually did. This was a parable. It's amazing how we can see real clear what somebody else do wrong and can't see how. Have y'all ever seen anybody that is overweight and look at this now? They lost 5 pounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they saw somebody else that came in. They said, "Ooh, she need to lose some of that weight." Y'all said, y'all. She ain't lost but 5 pounds. She overweight currently. But somebody else came in, she said, oh, she need to do something. She need to do something for herself. Have y'all seen a mechanic that said, Lord, that car's running so bad. I hear the valves knocking. I hear, they need to get them things. It's a 31 on the right side clicking. He need to get that thing fixed. Go out there and crank his car up, and it's smoking so bad it kills all the mosquitoes in the area. Can't see his own. Have y'all seen a hairstylist that a lady came in and you can see all the ends? They call them, they can see the ends. Had some nappy ends, She said somebody just didn't do her right. And then you look at her head, and you say, is she blind? She must not have a mirror in her own house. You can see everybody else, but can't see ourselves. We are guilty of that, aren't we? We've got to change. We got to say, Lord, help us to see our own as we see what everybody else is doing. Well, let's transition now to another part of our lesson, section 2, a tale of the king. Tale of the king. We see the guilty one in this section. We see the blessed one in this section. And we see the ungrateful one in this section. Let's read about the guilty and the blessed in verse 7 and 8. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus said the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. Saul wanted to kill him. See, I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul, and I gave thee thy master's house, and thy master's wives, women, the wives, unto thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have given unto thee such and such things. The conversation then between Nathan and David took place sometime later, months later, this conversation between, so, David probably don't forget about it, and so to speak. You don't forget about the wrong you do, but you can push it back in your mind. And so David had time then to rationalize, and he had time then to bury the sin that he had done, to bury that way back in his mind. But now David stood exposed to an all-knowing, and before an all-knowing, before an all-seeing, and before an all-powerful God. David, you the rich man, you the one. And I want you to read Psalms 139, verse 7 through 12. Nathan reminded David, sometimes we got to be reminded of how good God has been to us, of the favor that the Lord had shown to him. And very clearly, you can only imagine that David had to remember the day when he was called from the pastor out in the field to the palace. When he was anointed king. You read about this in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1 through 13. In class, this is why it's so important for all of us never to forget where we come from. Never to get too big for your britches, so to speak. Never think we are above reproach. We are above correction. That we can rationalize and compromise because of our place in power, position and prestige and influence. That we can throw a rock and hide our hand, that we can sin in the valley and not come to the mountaintop. None of us are exempt from doing wrong. None of us can do wrong and get by. All-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful God is always watching. And he got somebody that can get the word over. Now we can choose to ignore it, but eventually it's going to come up again. For a new king to assume the position of the old king and the old king's house, was a custom of that day to get all the old king's wives and his whole house. I mean, that was a custom of that day. David got everything that the old king had. And part of the new king's package deal, as Saul's old successor, included all them wives and concubines and female servants. And it also gave a clear indication that the Lord blessed him and gave him the kingship. And all that was the king had access to, David had access to it as well. The Lord also gave David another promise, that he's going to have a never-ending dynasty, an ongoing dynasty. He told him also, David, you're going to have a great name. He gave him, look at this rundown, look at this resume, look at this long sheet of blessings that the Lord had gave to David. And David, why would you do what you did? And not only that, David, if what I gave you, if that wasn't enough, I would have gave you a whole lot more. Why in the world would you go after this one man's little lamb? And you're going to read about who that lamb was here in a minute. Verse 9, wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? Some folks think, Lord, I heard years ago, one of our sisters in our church said that she used to go and smoke reefer. And when she smoked that reefer, she got up under the cover, covered up her head. As if the Lord can't see me under this cover, smoking this reefer. No. The Bible says to do this evil in his sight. Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. and has taken his wife to be thy wife, and has slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. To commit such a heinous crime in the face of all the abundance that he had was just pure wickedness. David violated the commandment against coveting, the commandment against adultery. He violated the commandment against murder. You read about this in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, 14, and 17. And Nathan saw what he had done that was so wrong. Nathan called Bathsheba, not David's wife. He took her to be his own wife. He called Bathsheba Uriah's wife, which emphasized the fact that David, you took somebody to be a wife that wasn't yours to take. You use your authority as kingship, your kingship authority, your power and prestige. In a real sense, the fear that folks had for you, the fear, and bullied your way in and took this woman here from this man. That was dirty, David. That was dirty and low down. I mean, dirty and low down. And this dirty and low down deed that he did was going to have some bad consequences as a result of what he did. Y'all read 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 10 and 11. And the sword was represented military violence, because that's what he did. Put that man out on that front line, David's gonna have torment in his household. The sword, a lot of killing was gonna take place in his household. A lot of drama was gonna take place in his own family, close family members, his son, and all this it's going to be rough. Y'all read 2 Samuel 13 and 29, 18 and 14. Then 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 24 and 25. It was going to get rough in his own household. His boy Absalom and all this. One of the sisters is going to get raped by her own brother. And Absalom is going to get upset because David didn't go get him. And then Absalom is going to come after David. Boy, it's going to get rough in there because that sword wasn't going to leave his house. God was going to forgive him, but he was going to sure get it. And since he took Uriah's wife, somebody close to him, y'all read about it in 2 Samuel 16, verse 21 and 22. Somebody close to him was going to take his wives, David's wives. Boy, hey, we can't do wrong and get by. Anyway, let's go to the third section as I hasten to my close. Moving beyond the tales is the third section, verses 13 through 15. We see confession, we see mercy, and we see consequences in this last section. And David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also had put away thy sin. Thou shalt not die. He didn't say he wasn't going to get it. Now, constant. He said, I ain't going to kill you. But boy, look here, you're going to have to sure enough reap what you sowed. Prophets at that time who spoke truth to power often discovered that the one they was talking to, the power made excuses. The truth that they spoke the power made excuses. And often they were not willing to listen. You read about this in 1 Kings 18, 16 through 18, 1 Samuel 13 through 21. But when Nathan got through talking to David, David couldn't make no excuses. And the word says that he was a man after God's own heart. Now, listen to this, after God's own heart. He wasn't a perfect man, but he went after doing the thing the Lord wanted him to do, and messed around did some crazy stuff that he himself wanted to do. Read in Acts 13:22 about what I just quoted. And the Lord said that David had followed him with all his heart. The word says, to do that only which was right in mine eyes. That's 1 Kings 14 and 8. But you go one chapter over now, In 1 Kings 15:5 it says, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. He did what I told him to do. He followed the right thing. But man, when he got right there, he saw that woman right there on that rooftop. Boy, he fell off the wagon. He fell off the wagon. See. So at this point, David really felt the weight of his sins all down in his bones. I mean, he felt what he had done that was so wrong. Y'all read Psalms chapter 32 and verse 3 and 4. But by confessing the sin that he had done, David somehow or another unburdened himself. He put down that heavy burden of guilt of what he had done. He went on to write a prayer of cleansing and a prayer of restoration. You read about that in Psalms chapter 51, or the 51st division of Psalm. So then confession then was the first step on the path to forgiveness for David, and confession is the first step for all of us on the path to be forgiven. You read about this in 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9. But David wasn't going to get by. David was forgiven, but he wasn't going to get by for the sin that he had done. You know, some folks do wrong. They say, I told you I was sorry. Well, you know, I got you. But there's going to be some consequences for the wrong that's done. The last two verses, verse 14 and 15, it says, howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. And Nathan departed unto his house. And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife, it didn't say that David's wife. He done took the woman and married a woman. No, you still ain't your wife, David. That Uriah's wife bare unto David. And it was very sick. So David then had demonstrated just a shameless blind eye. I can't see God's standards. Just a shameless blind eye to the standards of God. And the result of what David did was the death of an innocent child. The punishment of what he had done was the death of the seed that he had sown was going to be grown, was going to grow, and as a result of that, or be born rather, death. My goodness. So the death of the child then, along with the record of Nathan's prophecy, was going to be evidence, solid evidence to the whole nation that the Lord saw what David did. And when the Lord saw what David did, just like David handed down the verdict, the man that done this here gonna surely die. He gonna restore that man four sheep. Well, God handed down a verdict for David, a heavenly verdict. And the verdict then that it was handed down was going to cause other people that was around, those that was looking, to really look at their sins. And to be careful now, because they knew now that if God got King David, his anointed king, if God got him and disciplined him, he going to sure enough get us as well. So let's all mind how we walk, and mind how we talk, and mind where we go, and mind what we say. Because God, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-seeing God, is watching us. And there is a heavenly verdict that he also can hand down on our behalf. Verse 15, we got to bring this thing on in now. For the next 7 days, after David got this heavenly verdict, David was going to sit around and he was going to watch. He was going to pray that perhaps the Lord was going to forgive him again for what he had done and recall the verdict. He was going to show him mercy for what he had done, more so than he had showed on Uriah the Hittite, in having him killed and taking his wife, committing adultery with his wife, getting a woman pregnant, trying to get Uriah to go down there Go down there and sleep with your wife. Uriah wouldn't do it. So when he wouldn't do it, he had him killed. So he watched and he prayed for 7 days. Perhaps the Lord is going to spare this boy here and ain't going to kill him. But that boy got sicker and sicker, and that child eventually died. Read about that in chapter 12, verse 16 through 20 in 2 Samuel. So the prophet Nathan then, when he confronted David, David couldn't hardly take it, but he had to wash himself and get up because the child was gone now and he couldn't bring the child back. But the prophet did confront David again and let him know that the Lord ain't gonna give up on you. He ain't gonna throw you away. He ain't gonna dethrone you like you did Saul that was before you. You repented, you confessed, you admitted. And if you admit it and quit it, you're going to still have a dynasty. You're going to still have a great name. And then down the road, King Jesus came through the loins, through the line, the lineage of King David. I want y'all to read 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 38, Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 5 and 6, and Acts, the history of it in the New Testament. Read Acts 2, 29 through 31. Hey, look, we're out of time. Y'all have a great rest of the Sunday. We look forward to seeing you in the same place, same time next Sunday. Y'all have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.